Hello and welcome to Business Insider with Mario Toneguzzi on yycbusiness.ca. Joining me today is Corinne Pohlmann, who is Senior Vice President of National Affairs for the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Thanks for joining us today, Corinne.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, today your organization released its pre-budget submission that is going to the federal government for the federal government's budget, the upcoming budget. I'm going to go through a couple of the major highlights of what you folks are looking for from the government. The first point is a moratorium on any new taxes and costs for small business. Can you talk about that, Corinne, and why that is so important right now?
Well, of course, as you can imagine, many small businesses right now are still struggling very much due to the pandemic, and many have faced shutdowns in recent weeks, even months, in some cases across the country. And even though some places are starting to reopen, such as in Alberta, they're still limited in how much they can actually put together, right? So the moratorium is important because this is not the time to be adding new costs to businesses. In fact, earlier this year, Canada Pension Plan, the CPP premiums went up, and this was not exactly great news for a lot of businesses already struggling to keep people hired, and now they had to pay more in payroll taxes. The employees had to also pay more, but we just believe it's the wrong time to be increasing other taxes. We know, for example, the carbon tax will be going up starting April 1st. That's going to add a lot of new costs to small businesses who are maybe potentially more reliant on energy. We also have rumors out there of, making some of the changes to EI permanent, which add huge costs again to small businesses, and other initiatives that could potentially add permanent spending and increase taxes for small businesses. And we just believe that this is not the time. We need to help businesses get back on their feet, and we need to postpone any kind of new costs that may be imposed on businesses for the foreseeable future.
Okay, and another point that CFIB makes is forgiving small business debt and having longer repayment terms for loans. Why is that important?
Well, this is, as you can imagine, most small businesses, or many small businesses, have been shut down a couple times throughout the last year, and in doing that have likely accumulated a lot of debt, whether it be loans from a bank or just unpaid bills that they haven't been able to pay. And we have estimated that the average small business right now has accumulated over $100,000 in debt since the beginning of the pandemic. And there's some new vehicles that have come out. For example, there's the Highly Affected Sector Credit Availability Program, which is a new loan program that was just released about a month ago, which provides businesses who have more than a 50% revenue loss with access to a 10-year loan that's only at 4%. There's all kinds of good features to it, but a lot of businesses are just not interested because they're worried about adding even more debt to what they've already accumulated. So we're suggesting that potentially one way as a stimulus to help these businesses recover is to start forgiving some of these debts that are out there. So for a government loan, whether it's the Canada Emergency Business Account loan or this new one, maybe the government could forgive more of those debts. So for example, as I said, a Canada Emergency Business Account right now, about 1/3 of it can be forgiven, but maybe we can expand that to 50%, right? And find ways to help alleviate some of that. Also, we need to make sure that the repayment terms are more flexible. Some folks who thought when they got what we call CEBA loan earlier in 2020, the end of 2022 is when you have to repay it if you want to get the forgivable portion. We're now a year later, and many of them are now worried they won't be able to pay it back by the end of 2022. So maybe we need to extend some of those repayment terms as well. So that we believe is an important measure right now to really help businesses get out from underneath a lot of the debt they've accumulated.
Okay, and another recommendation is hiring incentives and offsetting the costs, as you mentioned, of CPP increases. What kind of hiring incentives and does CFIB thinks needs to be out there, and why is that important right now for, I guess, for the overall economy?
Yeah, I mean, getting people back into jobs is probably one of the best ways to get the economy moving again. When businesses are allowed to reopen again, and because they have so much debt, there's going to be a lot of hard decisions for those businesses to make in terms of, well, how many people can I hire? How quickly can I do this? So having hiring incentives in place, for example, the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy has been really, really good in helping to support businesses to keep their employees at a difficult time. But potentially we can extend that beyond and make it into a bit of a stimulus measure for those that have really been hard hit to help them keep those employees. We also believe, of course, there are certain segments of the population, such as younger people, who have been harder hit. So why can't we maybe do some incentives for businesses to maybe make some efforts to hire more of them when they're back in the ability to do so? So that could be in the form of payroll tax rebates. So offsetting the costs that went up, but also giving people some rebates back for all the payroll taxes they pay on hiring someone who's maybe under the age of 25 or something. We also really like the summer jobs program this year. They made some pretty big changes to it. For example, there's up to a 75% wage subsidy for young people. They are extending it beyond the summer, and they are allowing part-time work. So that kind of flexibility, I think, would be really helpful in order to encourage more businesses to hire young people into the jobs as they become more and more available, hopefully, in the not too distant future.
Okay, and businesses have always talked about red tape and the issue of being overburdened by red tape. Is this a critical time for the government to look at reducing that red tape for small businesses?
Well, red tape after taxes is always up there as one of the most burdensome thing our members deal with in running their businesses. And the one thing the pandemic has taught us is that governments, when they're motivated, can make changes quickly, and they can make changes that are going to benefit the economy overall. And so we know that they're capable of making adjustments to regulations as required. For example, we saw some great things around patio rules over the past summer and allowing when you do takeout to sell alcohol with that. I mean, that's not federal, it is at other levels of government, but those types of changes are important in order for us to continue to move forward. And so we believe that the federal government can also take a good hard look at its regulations, find ways to simplify them, put more things into plain language. Anybody who's tried to do their taxes understands that very well, and there needs to be a lot more plain language used in sort of bringing that information to small business owners. And then, of course, simplifying forms of processes, because some of the effort it can take just to get information from government in itself is a challenge. And those are the things we think can be addressed now.
Okay, super. And the last point is holding off consumer incentives until businesses can benefit. Maybe you can explain what that means for me.
Sure. I mean, the government last fall has sort of indicated in the economic statement that they are looking to spend anywhere between $70 and $100 billion in stimulus money once we start moving out of the pandemic to sort of get the economy rolling again. And one of those areas potentially could be around getting consumers to start spending money. There's no doubt one of the reasons small businesses are struggling so much is because they don't have the consumers they once did walking in their doors, partly because they've been shut down and partly because many consumers, for good reasons, are fearful of going out. And so we want to make sure we're pushing consumers back in the doors of those businesses all across Canada, and particularly in those small businesses. So there have been discussions of providing consumer incentives. It could be a GST holiday. It could be providing checks or something just to encourage them to go and visit a small business, go travel somewhere in Canada to just keep the economy going. And we're not opposed to that at all, but we want to make sure that before any stimulus like that is provided, if it is, make sure that the economy is fully reopened, meaning the small businesses are able to actually benefit from that particular incentive. Because if they do it too early and half the businesses are still running at half capacity, who benefits? But the large multinationals who've really benefited throughout this particular pandemic, such as the Amazons and the Walmarts and the Costcos of the world. And, you know, no offense to them, but we need to make sure we're broadening that incentive out to a lot more small businesses as well.
Okay, super. Well, thanks very much for Corinne for joining us today.
Thank you.
Okay, that was Corinne Pohlmann, who is Senior Vice President of National Affairs for the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. This has been Business Insider with Mario Toneguzzi on yycbusiness.ca. Thanks for joining us today.